I could feel myself drowning in sweat, the lights blaring at me, that summer heat in Taipei rising up from the ground. And for the first time in a long time, as I stood on the stage and held a microphone, I could feel my hands shaking. Nervousness had been building up. Because that night was the first night ever that I would be interpreting from Japanese into Chinese in front of several hundred people at Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Hall. I had never done it before, but there were lots of moments along the way that led to the big moment on that stage. Because the thing is that if you looked at me at that moment wearing a suit on that stage next to a Japanese pastor, you would think, oh, this is what this guy does. He looks pretty confident. He's always been this way. But the truth is, my life started out very differently. I started out, and my mom is here. She can attest to it. Thanks. That's why I brought her for the applause, really. I started out as a farm boy. Day in and day out, feeding the horses, throwing bales of hay, watering the animals, riding horses, getting thrown off of horses. There was very little in my world that involved learning Chinese or learning Japanese. That life on that farm was so far away from that moment on the stage. And I started to think about, as I prepared this speech and thought about that moment on the stage, what I opened with tonight, that day was Pentecost. And you might hear the word Pentecost and think it's like a taco or some kind of fancy salad. No, Pentecost is a festival that happens 50 days after Easter. And then for Christians, we celebrate Pentecost and are reminded about how the Apostle Peter spoke in front of thousands of people, and the Holy Spirit moved through Peter, and people started to speak multiple languages. And as a language learner, Pentecost is one of my favorite Christian holidays, because I think maybe this year, God will give me an extra language. But the thing is, if you look at Peter, that day, maybe people who listened to Peter thought he was always a speaker. He was always a religious leader. But the funny thing about Peter was Peter didn't start that way. How did Peter start his life? What was Peter's job before he was doing that? Fisherman. He was a fisherman. Go to any fishing wharf around the world and talk to a fisher. They're not necessarily a TED Talk speaker. They're not necessarily the most polished individual. And yet, Peter went from being a fisherman to an amazing apostle for Christ, speaking to thousands of people and changing lives. And I thought about, for that moment, on that stage at Pentecost, speaking multiple languages, none of them my native one. How all of a sudden, my journey from farm boy to speaker had all of these unexpected twists and turns to get myself ready for the moment. Because the thing is, we all have talents and gifts and abilities and time. And it's about how we're using these things that lead us to the moment. Now, I believe a few weeks ago, I think it was Nick or another member, was talking about connecting dots. Maybe it was somebody else. But it's one of those famous Steve Jobs quotes where you don't know where life is taking you and how the dots are connecting until you look back. And so when I talk about being ready for the moment, you might think to yourself, you have to know what that moment is going to be. You have to know so you can get ready. But the funny thing is about those moments, the moments where you need the skills that you have, the talents you have, the thing that makes you you, you don't know when the moment is going to happen. And you don't necessarily know what the moment is going to be. I had never expected to be at Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Hall interpreting Japanese into Chinese. These sorts of things just happen. But what helped to lead to being able to meet the moment was a love of learning languages and spending time day in and day out learning Chinese, learning Japanese, and also practicing English. My wife is a fantastic English teacher. Her English is much more proper than mine. It's very helpful. But the thing is that that time being spent there eventually meant that when the moment came, I was ready to go. I could take to the stage. And so what I want us to be thinking about, because today our theme is TGIF, my commitment. It's day one of a new term. And so I want you to be thinking about it with me. What are the things that you really care about? What are the skills and the gifts that you've been given? And how do you want to spend time building those so that when the moment comes, you can be ready and come to meet that moment? And I don't know what your moment will be. But I know that there are many talented, wonderful individuals here. You could be anywhere on a Friday night, but you chose to come here. And so in my mind, I think that you already have a thought about where that moment will come from, what that moment will look like. And so I want you, like me, to continue to be getting ready for the moment. Build the skills that you have, and just let life take you one step at a time to a special time in a special place where you will be ready to meet it. Toastmaster of the evening.